Yes, everybody, welcome back to Talking Wolves. Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel today. The 21-22 season is over. And today I'm going to be looking at 5 players that I think Wolves should take a look at from the 3 teams that were relegated. Of course, in the end, it was Burnley, Watford and Norwich. And although, to be honest, at least Watford and Norwich were 2 of the poorest teams that we've seen in the Premier League for some time now, every time a team goes down, there are still 1 or 2 players in there that you would expect to be back into the Premier League next season. So we're going to be talking about these 5 players that I've picked out today, looking at their numbers from this season just finished, and looking what they would bring, looking at what they would bring to Wolves. And of course, I don't think any of these would be guaranteed starters, but let me know your thoughts on the 5 that I've picked, and let me know your thoughts on any players that you think I've missed out from this list. So player number 1, and we're going to start with Emmanuel Dennis from Watford. He got 10 goals and 6 assists for Watford this season, and it wasn't just as a striker. He played a handful of positions, predominantly wide left or up front. So to be getting, I'd probably say about 50% of his games were on the wing. So to be getting those sort of numbers still is a very decent record. Of course, he's got a lot of pace as well as a quick forward, and I think that's what Wolves have lacked in the attacking areas, mainly centrally, really, a very quick and pacey forward. And I think if Wolves want to change how they play next season, whether that be with 2 up front, I think Emmanuel Dennis would be a very decent option to try and get in behind these defences. For argument's sake, yesterday, the way that Wolves were breaking through Liverpool, who had a really high line, Pedro Neto was a real threat until he got injured. I think if Emmanuel Dennis had those same sort of runs that the likes of Hwang Hee-chan had yesterday, I think it could have been a different story and Wolves could have easily got 1 or 2 more goals. In terms of on the ball as well, Emmanuel Dennis had beaten 80 players. He dribbled past 80 players this season, which is the 3rd most in the league, and he got the most nutmegs. So the most nutmegs trophy goes to Emmanuel Dennis this season. Watford paid just under €4 million for him from Club Bruges. This is his most goal contributions in a single season for Emmanuel Dennis. So is it a sort of one season wonder? I don't know. It completely depends on the value and how much Watford would want for Emmanuel Dennis. But I think it would definitely be a very decent option for Wolves to bring in. Like I said, signing for just under €4 million last summer. You'd expect they'd want to make a profit on that. I don't know. I'm sure I saw somewhere they were asking about €20 million, if it's or £20 million. I would steer clear if it's that much. But I would, in and around 10 million, I think I'd take for Emmanuel Dennis. Very quickly looking at his percentiles as well. The one on the left against other attacking midfielders and wingers in the top 5 leagues around Europe show obviously really decent goal scoring stats, but nice defensive areas as well. Good amount of pressures, good tackles, and a fantastic amount of aerial duels won as well. Against other forwards, again, his pressures, tackles, interceptions and blocks are really high. Progressive passes, carries and dribbles completed are good as well. So overall, it looks like a player that is really strong and really comfortable on the ball and should be able to get us up the pitch, which is what Wolves have really lacked this season. Moving on to player number 2, we're now looking at Burnley's Dwight McNeil. Now, McNeil, in terms of numbers this season, it is his poorest number for goal contributions since he broke into the Burnley first team. However, against other attacking midfielders or wingers in and around the top 5 leagues, you can see his defensive numbers are really, really solid. And this is why maybe if Wolves or if Bruno Lage is wanting to keep with this sort of back 5 system, I think Dwight McNeil would be a really intriguing option as a wing back. Obviously, if he was comfortable in joining the club to play there. As you can see, another player that on the ball in terms of dribbles completed is really strong. Pressures, tackles, interceptions, blocks are really high numbers as well. Now, what I don't think most people realise is that Dwight McNeil is still only 22 years of age. So got a huge amount of Premier League experience, over 130 games in the Premier League already at the age of 22. Predominantly left-sided players, played on the left midfield for most of the season. Got a handful of games from the right-hand side for Burnley. Now, in terms of numbers, he's got the most crosses into the penalty area out of any player in the Premier League this season. He got the 4th most pressures out of any Premier League player this season, and he dribbled past the 2nd most amount of players, obviously just behind Emmanuel Dennis, and the 2nd most crosses overall in the Premier League. So, although his numbers aren't completely, aren't fantastic reading this season, I still think Dwight McNeil, depending on the value that Burnley want, would be a good option. Now, the thing with Burnley is that now they've gone down, I'd expect them to it'd be interesting to see how they cope financially. So I think there are going to be a number of players that are going to be moving away from the club. They are going to have to start selling players. So I think McNeil could be available for a really, really decent amount. And I'd like to see Wolves try and have a go at bringing him in. Sticking with Burnley, player number 3 on my list is James Tarkowski. A defender, again, that has got plenty of Premier League experience. Joined Burnley from Brentford some years ago now. And he's got the second most aerials won in the Premier League this season. And I'm pretty sure he's been in the top 3 for that category for the last 3 or 4 seasons in the Premier League. Like I said, huge amount of Premier League experience. But the key thing here is that he's going to be available on a free. He's going to be leaving Burnley at the end of his contract, which ends this summer. Now, a number of Premier League teams are already sniffing around him. I know I've seen Leicester, I've seen West Ham, I've seen plenty of teams linked. Now, centre-back is an area that Wolves have got to improve on. Of course, Romain Saiss looks like he's going to be leaving the club at the time of recording. Willy Bolly, Connor Cody, Max Kilman and Totti Gomez, I'd say, the only other first-team options at the moment. And Wolves, I think, have just lacked that little bit of bite, fight and experience. And I think James Tarkowski, Tarkowski or Tarkovsky, you can decide how you pronounce it. With him being available on a free, I think Wolves would be daft to look away at this one, really. Good defensive stats. Also, a bit of an attacking menace as well if you look at his percentiles here against other centre-backs. Now, pick Tarkowski as my pick, but I'm going to also put an honourable mention in. So this isn't included in my 5, but another Burnley centre-back in Nathan Collins. Now, he's a very talented young defender. He signed from Stoke last summer. Phenomenal defensive numbers. He only played about half of the season. He played about 19 games this year. So phenomenal defensive numbers for him. I think he'd be a very good squad option. Another very young centre-back who's breaking in. I spoke to a Burnley fan a couple of weeks ago who thinks he's going to be a top-end Premier League defender within the next few years. However, they did pay quite a decent fee for him. They paid quite a big fee for Collins last year. So I think they would demand similar money again. And is it the sort of money that Wolves would want to be spending on someone that's still fairly inexperienced in the Premier League? Probably not. But Nathan Collins, keep your eye out for him, folks. I think he'll be a very talented player in the future. Player number 4 is Teemu Pukki. I never thought I'd be saying that I wouldn't mind Wolves signing him. But I think if it wasn't for that, I think it was that cameo at Molineux a few weeks ago. And he gave us absolute nightmares. Really, really good performance from him, especially in the first half at Molineux a couple of weeks ago. And his record at Norwich has been phenomenal. For a player that has been sort of working off scraps for the last 2 Premier League campaigns this year and obviously a few years ago, he still scored 22 Premier League goals across those 2 campaigns, which I think is a very decent record and a lot more than many Premier League strikers would have got across 2 seasons as well. Like I said, caused Wolves all sorts of problems. He's getting up towards the latter stages of his career. Now, I don't think he would be an automatic first teamer for Wolves, but I think definitely as a depth option, I think Teemu Pukki would definitely be decent. I don't think he would demand a huge fee from Norwich, although he had just signed a new deal. And Wolves have been linked with him before. There's been a couple of players. I know Dennis as well, we were linked with previously. So Wolves have got links to a few of these players. So it would be intriguing to see what happens with Pukki's career next season. And the final player on my list is another Burnley player. We're looking at Josh Brownhill, who's been pretty much ever present for Burnley this season. Had a huge amount of games for the Clarets. And he's a player, again, I don't think would be an automatic starter or not a guaranteed starter for me for Wolves. But I think if we had a midfield 3, whether that be in a 4-2-3-1, a 4-3-3, or even sticking with a 5-3-2, I think it would be a very decent option for Wolves to have there. Look, we're completely light on midfield numbers at the moment in terms of first teamers. We've got Neves, Dendoncker, Matinho. Include Kundal in that if you wish. But it's not strong enough. And I think that has let us down in a few games this season. I think Brownhill, like I said, not somebody that's just going to come in and play every single game, but be a good option for Wolves. His defensive numbers, as you can see, are pretty decent. So I think someone just to frustrate the opposition and win the ball back, I think he would be a very capable option for Wolves. Now, Burnley signing from Bristol City for just under £10 million. Again, that's probably a fee that they'll be looking at trying to recoup as much of as they can. And yeah, it'd be an interesting option there. But guys, that is my 5 players that I think Wolves should look at from the teams that have gone down. Do let me know your thoughts. There were a lot of players that I looked at and considered. There are lots of players in there. But like I said at the start of the video, I think a couple of the teams this season have been some of the poorest teams. So it's very, honestly, there was one or two there that stood out. But there were 2 or 3 other players that were sort of weighing up. And it'll be intriguing to see Wolves, how they go about their business this year. Of course, going to be loads of transfer videos, lots coming up this summer, and fingers crossed it's going to be a busy one for Wolves as well. Guys, as always, be sure to hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you all very soon.